Force Radio presents.
Last night, a Jedi was murdered.
She's killing Jedi.
I didn't do it! Believe me!
She was my student. I trained her. Now she is a student of the dark side.
This is a fight that you will not win.
The Jedi live in a dream, but an acolyte kills the dream.
This is Rebel Force Radio's The Acolyte After Show.
All right, Acolyte After Show back with new analysis for the latest episode of The Acolyte, Episode 3, Destiny. A very popular Star Wars word. Destiny. I can't hear that word without thinking about it in Palpatine voice. You're fulfilling your destiny, Anakin. And Anakin Skywalker, who's not in this episode, but I do get the sense that they are, in a roundabout way, referring to the Chosen One, who up to this point is the only immaculately conceived Star Wars character we know. So I can't help but think that there are lessons perhaps to be taken from what we're learning about Osha and Mae, but we'll get into all of that and so much more. We know that, this episode, not unlike the last two episodes, certainly has a lot of people talking, asking questions, and some of the discourse is fun and it's interesting, and some of the discourse is a little less than fun and a little less interesting, and certainly not what this show is about. So if you're interested in discussing, and I think I said this on the last one, the personal politics of the creatives or of the company putting it out, that's not what this is about. I'm not saying there's not a place for that kind of discourse, but it's not what we're doing here on the Acolyte After Show from Rebel Force Radio. We're going to look at the story. We're going to break it down. We're going to talk about the beats we liked, the beats we didn't like. But in terms of some of that, I guess, behind-the-scenes drama, it's just not something that I'm interested in getting into. But anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun, great discussion. So the phone number is in the description here on YouTube. So grateful to be with all of you. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. If you're new to the program, and I suspect there are new people tuning in, introductions may be in order. My name is Jason, and with me, as always, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Excuse me, I got a little spice cream on my lip. And spice cream, a sweet treat served in the Fortress of the Witches. Soon to be on sale at Galaxy's Edge.
Oh, you stole my joke.
Spice cream. Well, I had to say it during the intro because I knew that wouldn't last too long out there in the wild. Spice cream. I'm getting that right. They called it spice cream.
I thought they called it space cream, but it's spice. I went back and looked at the transcript. I thought it was space cream, and I'm like, wow, that's really on the nose. But no, it was spice cream. So not quite as bad. But isn't spice? Isn't that something? It wasn't Han Solo smuggling spice?
Yeah, it's traditionally been known as a drug in Star Wars.
Wow.
When what's his name? Elon Sleazebagano approached Obi-Wan Kenobi in the bar on Coruscant, the betting parlor. He had the death sticks.
Yeah.
And I believe those things are loaded with spice.
Really?
A lot of spice. Very spicy. Yeah.
But those are the death sticks without any writing on them. The ones that are loaded with spice.
Well, there's your black market
right.
death stick, and then there's the over-the-counter death stick.
Yeah.
And, it just depends on how you want to provide yourself with a death-like experience. And I think that's the high you get off of spice. But, hey, let's package it up like a Twinkie and sell it to kid witches.
Yeah, stick it on an ice cream cone or, on a cone, and you'll be good. Hey, so I needed to make a correction from last week's after show. I had given Leslie Headland full writing credit on both episodes, and I was wrong. Episode 2, Revenge/Justice, was co-written by Jason McAuliffe and Charmaine DeGratte. So Leslie Headland did have solo writing credit on the first episode, but not the second one. So I just wanted to make sure that we gave credit to those writers.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
Yeah. Stop emailing us. Right?
Yeah.
You writers
Got it.
who demand your credit.
Yes. Well, let's get into it. We've got a lot to discuss in this 43-minute episode. We'll give you the tail of the tape here. We are talking about Season 1, Episode 3, Destiny, directed by Kogonada. And I have no idea who Kogonada is.
Documentary guy who's done a lot of documentaries about filmmaking and specific films. I think he cut his teeth on Breaking Bad and made a documentary about that.
Oh,
and he's made a ton of them. And he's sort of risen up through the ranks to catch the attention of Lucasfilm, but fairly green when it comes to the prospect of directing dramatic live action, and very green when it comes to tentpole franchises. And Star Wars is definitely one of those. So
you're saying
they really are
he
opening towards
he
it.
did direct Breaking Bad episodes, or a
No,
documentary
he
about Breaking Bad?
Yes.
I see.
Yes. He's done a lot of that kind of thing. And, independently too. So, his actual professional experience is rather limited, I think. And that's also the case with one of the writers on this episode too. Who wrote this? I don't know their names.
This is okay, so tail of the tape. Jasmine Flournoy and
Jasmine. So she has
Eileen Shim.
There's another Eileen. Eileen has experience. I think she's written in the Marvel realm on the Winter Soldier show, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So she's also had a former career as a journalist, an entertainment journalist or a film journalist. And so she's had some experience. The other writer, Jasmine,
Flournoy.
Flournoy.
Right.
Nothing. I mean, literally, there are no writing credits to her name prior to this episode of The Acolyte. She had bounced around on a couple of TV shows, serving as a production assistant, but in part, miscellaneous crew. But look her up; you won't find any writing credits on her
that's
resume.
a hell of a break to get if your first writing gig is on a Star Wars television series. And
she must have written the chant.
Yeah,
that the witches
I was going to say, I think I might be able to point to a few lines that might have come from Jasmine. Who knows? Maybe Jasmine wrote. For all I know, Jasmine wrote all the stuff that I liked about the episode.
Right.
But setting this up, the whole episode is a flashback, right? The first two episodes, we got a little bit of detail about what happened on Brendok. We weren't exactly sure. It seemed as though going into this episode that there were likely maybe two different perspectives that we might expect to get from, or, to hear about what actually happened on Brendok. So I was really surprised when this episode, which was a flashback, the whole episode is a flashback, expected that to happen sooner or later. But I was really surprised that it was not framed or bookended by a character so that we knew whose perspective this was coming from. That seems to be...
Oh, that might have been helpful.
It would have been helpful. So I'm left to assume that this is an objective, third-person, omniscient view of the events that happened. Because without any color in terms of the commentary or again, some sort of a bookend or anything super obvious, it like I'm comparing it to like the flashbacks that we saw in The Last Jedi, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
was
right.
obvious that there was Luke's version and it was obvious that it was Kylo's version because they were providing the narrative. In this case, there's nothing to tip you off about the perspective of the individual. So you're left to assume that it must be third-person objective. But
I don't think so. I think when
well,
you
I don't
look at
think
it
so
closely,
either, but go ahead.
I think when you look at it closely, you understand more and more. It is from Osha's perspective because there are too many blank spots in the storytelling. It only follows her. There's no cutaways to May after she sets fire to the door. And when she does that, we're largely seeing her from Osha's perspective. Then Osha is left alone, and all the activity happening with the massacre of the witches and what the Jedi's role was in it and what May's role actually was in it is all a mystery. That's left completely. So if it was told objectively, we would see this stuff. We would understand where the blank pages are in the story. But we can't because it is purely from Osha's perspective.
but
And I think the whole show is told that way.
The whole show is from Osha's perspective.
Well, largely. I mean, obviously, there's cutaways to May having discussions with Chimere and yada, yada. But I think largely we are to follow Osha and how she's reacting to everything as it unfolds. And also, she's the character that's largely in the dark. She doesn't know what happened to May during all those years they were separated. She doesn't understand what happened to the witches because she didn't see it. She was told it was her sister who set that fire. I think that's going to be challenged in future episodes.
But this is a show, Jim. But this is a show, Jim, where they're doing flashbacks throughout it, but you always see Osha waking up from a dream or a vision or something. Why would they stop using that visual cue here when the whole episode is a flashback?
Well, maybe she hadn't matured in the Force enough as a kid to experience visions. Just a guess.
No. What I'm saying is, in the first two episodes,
yeah,
Osha is having visions of May. She's having flashbacks of the events that happened there on Brendok, little flashes, and she's seeing apparitions of May as a child.
Yes. Yeah.
My point being is, they always give you. The storytellers have given you some sort of visual cue that this is happening in her head, like she wakes up or she snaps out of it. This is an entire episode that's a flashback, yet there's nothing to either, sell it from the beginning or at the end to say, who's dreaming this? Who's thinking this?
Well, maybe we haven't seen all of the flashback. Maybe it continues in episode 4. And then we'll see May sort of, or Osha kind of.
She'll wake up from the back to tank, like Boba did.
Right. So, but yes, I get what you're saying. It was just dropped in there after the first 2 episodes had established the pace and tone for the series. Then to suddenly jump into flashback mode in episode 3. I think as an audience member, I would have liked to have gotten more into the story that's being told in the present before jumping into the past. It felt a little jarring, actually.
Yeah.
Because after the first 2 episodes, I just wanted to see more from those specific characters. I don't even think I was ready to learn the whole backstory yet by episode 3. But there's a pacing to the way they're rolling out this story that might be easier to decipher after all 8 episodes have been released. But at this point, I certainly was not ready to jump into May and Osha's past.
Yeah.
Nor was I ready to jump into almost 45 minutes of spending time with them as a pair of 8-year-old kids.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, 43 minutes and original air date June 11th, 2024. Okay. So regardless of how I felt about the setup, we are dealing with a flashback the entire episode, and we are there 16 years prior to what we've seen in the first 2 episodes. We're on Brendok, and Jim, I'm getting like bad seed vibes from this, because it's like you've got the 2 kids here, and one is clearly good, the other is clearly not so good, and there's definitely a kind of a slow and steady, I guess, climb from being, Mae being sort of precocious and maybe just not sure of these feelings that she's having, to fast forwarding to the very end where she actually tells Osha, "I'll kill you." So now looking back on the whole episode, you've got the moment with the little bird. And now I know Osha stops or holds the bird as well. So you see Osha doing it, and then you see Mae doing it. But there's a different, first of all, the look on Mae's face is that of kind of a angry, it's not a nice look. She doesn't look like a nice kid there. And the music is a little bit different. The cue, the forced cue, the sound is a little more ominous. So on the one hand, you got Osha. She's looking at the little bird, hummingbird thing. And then on the other side, you got Mae. And it's almost like she's, I don't know, punishing it or just kind of toying with it, playing with it. It's definitely, it's like a kid with a magnifying glass setting fire to the ants.
Jason, quit flashing back to your childhood.
This
right. Is all about Osha and Mae.
Okay.
I kid. Jason has never bragged to me about killing ants with magnifying glasses. Hold the emails. So they're on Brendok, and Osha's sitting under a tree that oddly resembles her haircut and her sister's haircut. That didn't go over my head. I was like, what the hell? That's what they're basing their style after. The big tree. The tree is actually a bunda tree where Mae got the leaves from that she presented Chimere with to create the poison that killed Torben.
Yeah.
This is actually the bunda. It was kind of cool looking, but it was really
Bunta with a T.
Bunta is the Bunta race that happens in episode 1. This is Bunta.
This is
Is
Bunta.
it with a T?
It's Bunta with a T.
They have 2 things called Bunta, really?
It's Bunta, and it is named after the race. Bunta and Bunta race. It's all related. They're not 2 different things.
It is.
Yeah.
It's related. Well, that's news to me. I thought it was Bunda, B-U-N-D-A, but maybe I'm wrong.
It's the Bunta tree that is, but it's only dangerous if you eat it.
Yeah, don't eat it. Wonder what would happen if you smoked it.
You have a flashback.
Yeah, right.
Of Brendok.
You instantly go 16 years in the past. That's the thing that's weird about smoking Bunda. But yeah, Mae does. I thought she was kind of torturing that little fluttering creature. And it made me think about some of the reaction to the Phantom Menace. And George Lucas himself said that there were some people who wanted to see young Anakin reveal a real evil edge, a dark side edge as a child, as portrayed by Jake Lloyd. And George resisted doing that. He said, people wanted young Anakin to be pulling the wings off of flies and torturing weak creatures.
Right.
He resisted
and this
doing
is but this is what we get here, is it not?
Well, it is, but it's kind of a different story being told. George wanted to tell the story about how a kid who was inherently good was tempted by the dark side and then flipped to evil when he experienced the fear of loss. In this case, I think they're presenting us a yin and a yang.
Right.
With young Osha, who Osha does immediately scold Mae for doing that. And Mae then turns it around on Osha and says, why are you always running off to be by yourself? I share everything with you. And, so I mean, she changes the subject, but she has a bad kid streak in her. May does,
Yeah.
obviously, if it's going to be harming innocent creatures,
Right.
defenseless creatures. No normal person does that. So, I mean, that's like Jeffrey Dahmer territory, let's get real.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And
it's definitely the sign, it's become accepted that that's a sign of even worse behavior to come if you start to, torture small defenseless animals.
But May evolves into the good student, the head of the class as far as the witches are concerned. And she's like this.
Yes.
That
What
makes
does
me
that
jump to
say about the
conclusion.
witches?
Right. It
Yeah.
tells me they are tapping into the dark side of the Force.
Yep.
And so for all of their, as we go through the episode, they're very confident they're the ones using the Force the right way, and they can't exist with others throughout the galaxy because of the power they wield and all this stuff. They're definitely tapping into the dark side of the Force. And I've been a Star Wars fan long enough to know dark side equals bad, bad people.
Yeah.
Bad people. So I'm just putting that up front to display the fact I have zero sympathy for the witches. I have no sympathy for the witches because I think they're tapping into the dark side of the Force.
Yeah.
And the Jedi have these rules for a reason.
Yeah, which we find out are backed up by law. So we find out. Yeah, we find out that there's a Republic law that states that Indara gets cut off, but we can assume what the end of the sentence is. The Republic law basically says that only Jedi can train children in the ways of the Force, that can train Force-sensitive kids. That's pretty obvious. And also, there's another line where I believe it's Indara again saying, even you, Mother Anasea, cannot say that we cannot test the child. So there's some, if that's not a law, that is certainly some given throughout the galaxy that the Jedi do have this right to test children for Force abilities, Force sensitivity, all of that. So,
well, apparently
and it comes back. Go ahead.
Beyond the Republic itself, because it's stated very clearly that Brendok is not part of the Republic. So how does the Jedi enforce law when they're outside their jurisdiction? Does it all become like morality at the top level and the Jedi can supersede any law as far as keeping the Force in check?
Yeah. It's a good question because those two statements do, as you're pointing out, seem as though it's happening on two different planes. There's the legal plane, and then there's sort of maybe this moral plane to some degree, or obligation. That's a
slippery slope the Jedi exist upon by becoming tools of the government.
Yeah. You mentioned the what was the power of one, power of two, power of many, or whatever the chant was. But there's another one, and we heard most of this. I don't know that we heard the whole thing earlier, but this is the little riddle. I think it's like a very creepy kind of nursery rhyme. That
there's a lot of
the two
stuff going on here.
That the two, you are with me, I am with you, always one, but born as two. As above sits the stars and below lies the sea, I give you you and you give me me. I don't know if it reminds me of like 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, 3, 4, shut the door. I don't know if it's a nursery rhyme or if it's a some sort of spell that they're casting or something like that.
Why do they have this?
Or that it has
rhyme?
its roots as a spell. Why would they chant this? There's got to be something to this.
Maybe it's a song, created by the equivalent of the Star Wars version of Led Zeppelin. Who knows?
No, I think it's sort of it's autobiographical of these two.
Right. Well, we've heard that some twins, they develop their own languages and stuff.
Well, that's
This
true.
is just a little bit of poetry these two share with each other that reinforces their bond with each other. But I mean, it's obviously failing because Osha, she has her eyes beyond what the coven has presented her. She has her eyes out on the galaxy.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to be tied down to this twin who's being really, first it starts off, I think, passive aggressive, and then it builds into aggressive.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that, okay, so for me, these two are representing in every obvious way the good side and the dark side. With Mae, even her attachment to her, I'll kill you before I'll let you go. I mean, that is the ultimate in terms of dark side attachment, possession. That's what George was warning us about, essentially, with Anakin and his love of Padme, his obsession with Padme, and then on the other hand, you've got Osha, who, when you think about it, she's lived the same life as her twin sister, raised by the same people, lived in the same, but she can't help but feel pulled or compelled to something bigger, something greater. That's the light side. She's willing to give up her family. She's willing to give up her coven, her tribe, to go out into the universe and blow up her Death Star or whatever. So, I mean, from that level, they are definitely, you could say two sides of the same coin, but clearly you've got an evil twin and a good twin. I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, right. And that's the Force working in mysterious ways, because with the evil twin demonstrating to the audience that she's the prize pupil of the witches and really eager, she's a real eager go-getter when it comes to doing witchy stuff. That just proves to me her dark side tendencies make her a natural to be with the witches. Thus, the witches are naturally tapping into the dark side. Again, they get no compassion from me, even though I did think that Jodie Turner, wow, what a presence
Smith
on screen. Jodie Turner Smith. I've never seen her before, but what a striking presence she is on screen. And the versatility of her to present almost a different take on the character in every scene. She's the leader in one scene. She's the compassionate mother in the other scene. She's nurturing in one scene. In another scene, she's demanding. There's so much range being brought to the screen by this particular actress. And I think she's just amazing to look at. I think she is someone.
No, she's definitely striking. She's very well cast in this.
Striking.
Yeah.
That's the word, striking. And here's a little bit of trivia about her. She is married to an actor named Joshua Jackson. And I think he was from the Dawson's Creek crowd or
I think
whatever.
they're divorced now, but they were married.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I thought they were married. Well,
they were.
She was married to him. And there's a Star Wars connection there, because back in the day, in the early 2000s, when George was prepping episode 2, Joshua Jackson was one of the guys who was rumored to be one of the top candidates for the Anakin Skywalker role. Obviously, it didn't go to Joshua. It went to Hayden Christensen. But he did. So I researched this a little bit just to see if my memory was correct in this matter. And while he didn't get too far as like auditioning and things like that, he did meet with Robin Gurlin, the casting director for the prequels, and he was under heavy consideration. But they some even say he was a finalist. But I don't think that he was ever screen tested as Anakin or ever did any line reads with Natalie Portman, anything like that. No, it never got that.
There was the two. It came down to Ryan Phillippe, Hayden Christensen, and there was a third guy who also I believe had the last name of Jackson. He's now on that Chicago Fire show. He's in all those, I think Chicago, what is his name? He was a soap opera actor. Someone in the chat, I'm sure will get it. But
his name was Leonardo DiCaprio Jackson.
No, I think it was Leo's role to turn down at one point. Yeah. I would love to know that full story. I don't know if it's ever been told completely, but
Leo's a hardcore
stuff.
Star Wars fan.
Yeah, very much
He's a
so.
hardcore Star Wars fan. And he was seen in footage at some of those Midnight Madness situations and events that were going on during the prequel era. And I just recently I read this thing about a girl who was dating Leo. She was some actress, not anybody really famous. I can't remember her name. But she said like the worst date she ever went on was when Leo DiCaprio rented out an entire movie theater to watch the original Star Wars trilogy. And while the films are being screened, Leo ran around the theater with a lightsaber, acting out things that were going on screen. And I'm like, wow, she thinks that was the worst date ever. That's like a dream come true.
Right.
For most guys.
Give me a call, Leo. I'll be happy. I won't be complaining about that date.
I want to go on a date with Leo just to see the movies in the theater with him. But that story made me laugh, and then it also made me say, well, how much is it to rent a movie theater? That's how I want my wife to experience the worst date ever.
So, all right. So getting back to the story here, we've got Mother Coral who interrupts the two girls arguing, and she says, "How many times have I told you it's not safe out here?" So, what do we know about this Brendok? It seems like it's relatively a new place. This is not where they originated from. They obviously immigrated to this planet. There's conversation later about, I thought this place was safe, blah, blah, blah. But there's something in and around. They have to keep their what they're doing secret. And so they hide in the fortress walls. And why do they have to? We figure out why they have to keep their what they're doing secret, because people are watching, and in this case, the Jedi are watching, and they definitely get the sense that there's something going on. And so these four Jedi, Saul, Kelnaka, Indara, and Torben, are there to check it out. And obviously they get some sort of, I'm sure that there's some sort of disturbance in the Force that they all get that then leads them to this. I don't think they're, this isn't like military intel or anything like that. No, but when there's all of this Force power usage going on a planet that is otherwise uninhabited, it's going to definitely come to the attention of the Jedi, I would think. And that's what's happening here.
Oh, yeah. And they realized the Jedi were there on the planet. That comes up later. It comes up in the scene right after the scene where Coral is admonishing the girls for being outside the fortress. Anastasia and Coral have a little talk over there in an alcove in the side of the village, and they reveal right away they know the Jedi are watching them. And then they reveal they came to Brendok because they thought it would be a safe place for the Coven, because they have a history of being hunted. And I thought, well, wow, they're witches. This is kind of a callback to the witches of Salem and other witch hunts that happened in the European Middle Ages, and the Salem witch trials that happened in Massachusetts, where they would investigate, and persecute people considered to be witches, and they'd hang them right in the village there. They were considered to be followers of Satan. Now that's dark side for you.
Yeah.
And
in that case, they weren't real witches. In this case, they are real witches. And so they deserve to be persecuted and hung.
True. But that just shows you. So like, I'm talking about like the late 1600s, and even further back in time in Europe, like in the 1300s, and people just, they believed in spooks and witches and things like that. They believed in that kind of stuff. And some people believed in it so much that became their go-to. That became their lifestyle. They thought they could be witches themselves and practice black magic and all this. Whether or not their spells actually came true or not, I mean, that's all just a bunch of fairy tale mumbo jumbo, as Han Solo would say. But people in the past believed it.
Yes.
And see, let's see if the witch doesn't float, things like that.
Right. So obviously this is tapping in. This is tapping into our own, as Star Wars does, our own mythology, our own history to some degree.
For sure.
And the idea of witches being misunderstood and persecuted.
But these are dark side witches. There's a whole different ball of wax here.
Are there light side witches, though, really? I mean, I don't know. I'm not into that.
Well, they would be Jedi, wouldn't they?
Well, that assumes now if there's different ways to express and use the Force on the dark side of the spectrum, then you could make a case that there's different ways to use the Force on the light side. So, look at Ahsoka Tano. She's a light side Force user, but as she says, I'm no Jedi.
Now,
but she's no witch either.
She was trained in everything she knows about the Force came from knowledge presented to her by the Jedi. And also her moral center came from that experience and background. Here with the witches, it's a whole different thing. And the Jedi want to have control of the Force because the Force tips out of balance. And if they're only practicing the light side and there are witches out in the galaxy practicing the dark side, the Force is going to tip out of balance. So it is something that needs to be managed and maintained. I think it's a discipline that needs to be learned if you're going to use the Force.
Okay.
Regardless of how self-righteous this band of witches are, they're still practicing the dark side of the Force.
Yes, and I've got the lines here because she talks about that, and it's very similar to what you hear Chimere say in the first couple of episodes about the Jedi, using basically justifying their control. That it's about justifying their control, and Anastasia says that this is about power. And I need to find the line here because it's a good thing. It's a good
if the balance of the
here.
Force is tipping toward the light side in this era of Star Wars, then that would naturally frustrate the witches because I think the Force works on both ends of the spectrum. Yoda said in the prequels, the dark side clouds everything. Mace Windu says, the rise of the Sith is diminishing their ability to use the Force. I think we're seeing the other end of the spectrum here, where the witches are trying to practice black magic via the dark side of the Force, and they can't do it to their potential because the Jedi have cornered the market on the Force in this era. And there are plentiful numbers of Jedi in the ranks. They're scattered all over the galaxy. So the Force is tipped out of balance for the dark side user.
I've got it here. This is Anastasia saying that this isn't about good or bad, because this is, as the girls are having an argument about are the Jedi good or the Jedi bad. She says this isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who is allowed to use it. The Jedi are policing, in a sense, who can and who cannot harness the power of the Force, though the witches call it the thread. She says, you're a very powerful girl. Right now you want to be a Jedi, but as you grow, what you want, it changes, it shifts, blah, blah, blah. But in Anastasia's mind, this is about their claiming their right to use the Force in the way that they want to use. And when she describes their vision of the Force, she says, all living things are connected by the same thread, a thread woven through all of existence. Some call it a force and claim to use it. So right there, they're drawing the distinction between what, their beliefs and the belief of the Jedi, They don't even call it a force. They call it a thread that connects everything, and says that they claim to use it, which would imply that they don't really feel that they're using it. They claimed, she's saying the Jedi claim to use this force, but they're not really.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy. If they're not using the force, then the force is using them, or the thread is using them. Is that the message she's trying to send to us? She's existing. There's a coexistence going on with the witches and the force, which is purely harmonious, while the Jedi harness the power of the force and wield it.
Yes, exactly. That's how, because she says, but we know the thread is not a power you wield. Pull the thread, change everything. It ties you to your destiny. It binds you to others. So there's definitely more, there's more of a passive relationship perhaps with the witches and this version of the force, in this case, the thread that they're using. So
when they carry on with that ceremony, the ascension, she says it's the first time they've ever had that ceremony go down since their exile. Well, exile from where and by who? She says they were hunted, persecuted, and forced into hiding, all by someone, whoever it is, I don't know, by someone who would consider their power to be dark and unnatural.
Right.
Okay.
Key word there.
So that sounds like she's pointing the finger at the Jedi, because it's the same stuff Palpatine was complaining about to Anakin
the exact
in
same
episode
stuff.
3.
Yes.
However, she's contradicting herself when she refers to their power. I mean, isn't she contradicting herself by claiming they have power, and that's why they're being persecuted? So they're obviously wielding the force. They're obviously using the force. They're not having, or the thread isn't using them. They've harnessed the ability to use it in a similar way to how the Jedi use it. But the Jedi have a hang up with that because they're tapping into the flippin' dark side.
Yeah, I mean, look, part of this is just the fact that I feel like, the storytelling here is not unlike this thread that they talk about where you pull it and it changes everything. In this case, a lot of it falls apart.
It's like pulling the loose thread on your sweater and all of a sudden,
right.
oh no.
Right.
What you were wearing is a pile of material.
Now you're naked. But here's the facts, gang. This is the Star Wars that's being presented to us, and we're going to we're going to analyze it. And sometimes when you hold things up to analysis, parts of it hold up, parts of it don't. But
for example,
yes.
For example, what is the lesson she's trying to teach the twins? The power of one cannot defeat her. The power of two still doesn't defeat her. So what's the difference between the power of one and the power of two? And we never really learn what the point of the power of many actually is.
No, because they get interrupted.
Because the power of one couldn't defeat. Right, I guess. The power of one. But I'm just saying, in that lesson she was giving to the twins, she goes, observe. And they, do like they're pushing each other. and her opponent fails. Then they bring in two witches to stand off against Mother Anastasia, and they fail as well. So what's the difference of the power of one and the power of two? What's the difference? They both fail against the mother. There's no lesson being taught here to these kids, and they're not even paying attention anyway. They're in one of the most annoying moments in this whole episode is when the two of them are fighting over a piece of fruit while they're supposed to be listening to the lessons.
I saw that, and I thought, that was one of when I started doing theater as an 11-year-old, that was one of the first things they taught you is don't upstage the action. And you've got the center of the action being Anastasia talking, and these two have business. Now, I'm sure they were directed that way, so this is not directed at the kids, the actors themselves. No. But it just was so awkward and weird. It was like, why are you letting these kids have this like almost offstage conversation At the same time, the mother is presenting this training, which is really not training. It's more like a lesson.
Yes.
So here's my thought.
A lesson with no point. A lesson that had no point.
Yeah.
Because the power of one and the power of the two were both futile efforts against the power of the mother. That's what she should have been teaching them, the mother power.
The fact is that the mythology behind this culture is not very deep. Unlike Jedi culture, which has been talked about, written about, explored for the last almost 50 years and developed, by a genius storyteller, George Lucas. What I think is a little overreaching here is the writers' attempt to create a force-using culture that's going to stand toe-to-toe with Jedi. I think it's a little arrogant here, because once you start taking it apart, there's not a lot of there.
No, and it's the witches themselves, they're just trying to exist. I get that. But they can't stand up to the Jedi because they're flawed. Like I said, I believe the balance of the Force is kind of the opposite of what it is when the prequels begin. The balance of the Force is clearly tipping toward the dark side at the beginning of the prequels. In this era, I think the Jedi have a monopoly on the Force, and it's all tipping toward the light side.
Right.
And that would render a lot of dark side users worthless because they can't tap into the full potential of the dark side of the Force. So maybe that's what the power of many means, the ability of many of them to concentrate on the dark side enough so when they're using it, the Force temporarily tips into their sense of balance, as opposed to what a light side user would have as a sense of balance of the Force. See, I look at it real big in real big terms, the way George Lucas presented this stuff. And if you're going to try to make the peg fit into the hole, you're going to have to go through the scrutiny of guys like us who have almost 50 years of myth knowledge behind us as fans. You can't just reinvent the wheel and have people expect where's the old round wheel.
Yeah, well, that's a bit of my issue here, is that they're really trying to stack up this witch subculture against a very rich and well defined and well understood Jedi culture, and it just, I don't think it holds up very well, and I think it weakens the show to this point. Because you don't have, I don't think you have they haven't created a viable alternative. The Sith, at least, even though they're evil, the Sith are a viable, well thought out alternative to the Jedi way. The witches aren't. So seeing them go up against the Jedi and seeing a child having to choose between this sort of ambiguous life as a force wielding witch versus something as well established as Jedi seems like a no-brainer. So I don't feel the weight of her choice here.
Right. I mean, with any knowledge of the Jedi, you'd look at them and go, well, now that's an organization that has their you-know-what together. Us as witches, we have to stay in, not only do we have to stay on this planet, Brendok, we have to stay within the walls of this fortress. There's no other kids around. It's just, there's no competition between what these poor, sad witches have to offer. Their approach to the Force is clearly something of the past, and it will not ever thrive in a galaxy where the Jedi exist. So does that make the Jedi bad? I think a lot of people have been jumping to the conclusion that the Jedi are being presented as bad in this, and I don't see it at all, because I think the Jedi are being self-righteous, as they should be, because it takes a discipline to be able to wield the Force. And if other people are wielding it via the dark side, via the course of fear, death, anger, what have you, then that tips the Force out of balance for the Jedi, which are the predominant Force users in the galaxy.
Yeah.
So you can't just be like, oh, live and let live, while these witches are in some isolated coven manipulating the Force to create life and tipping the balance toward the dark side. That's wrong as far as Star Wars terms do. So you can't ever develop compassion for the witches or sympathy for the witches, because their whole framework is based on evilness, tapping into the dark side. Evil.
But do you agree that the storytellers here, Leslie Headland, the other writers, that they're trying to make the case, because they've said that they're telling this from the perspective of the Sith, and the witches aren't the Sith, so we haven't even gotten to that. We haven't.
Right.
We've just seen this Sith, or who we think is the Sith.
Right.
I think Jeff Holland on the chat called him Darth Zipperface, or Zippermouth. It's easy.
That's good.
Gotta coin that. But we don't really know what's going on with that individual. But in the case of these witches, let's give credit where credit is due. Towards the end, Anastasia does, after she encourages the girls to lie, which, the very definition of lie. I love the way she says this. Whatever is in your heart, you must say the opposite. If that's not the definition of lying, I don't know what is. I mean, like you said, Jim, they every moment that they have to endear themselves or make them feel, at least in my book, to feel or to be something that I should feel compassion towards, they subvert that. I don't have any.
Oh yeah. I think that the witches are like the epitome of they're like totally against the ethos of what's good in the Star Wars universe. They're the antithesis of that.
Right.
They are, they're very self-centered. They're very fearful. They don't want to put themselves out in the galaxy, because they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to be hunted. They're afraid that people won't understand their unnatural abilities and things like that. So they've shut themselves off. That's the definition of being fearful, hiding in your fortress. So, I mean, their whole lifestyle is steeped in the dark side of the Force. And I'm sorry, Star Wars hasn't evolved enough for me to start liking people who are clearly dipping into the dark side of the Force.
Yeah, I do want to give Anastasia some credit here, because towards the end, she concedes that Osha obviously feels very strongly about wanting to become a Jedi,
Yes.
and appears to give in to that, to sort of, it seems as though she's going to go along with it there at the very end.
Well, they've always said, the strongest definition of love is the ability to let someone go and be themselves and find their own path through life. I thought it was a very sweet scene between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. I liked that scene. As a parent who, has raised children, I appreciated what was being presented to us in this scene, and the selfless act of letting her leave. Now, she was working against the grain, though. the majority of the witches did not
Right.
want to acquiesce to the Jedi. As a matter of fact, the Coral, she wanted to sneak into the Jedi camp at night and kill them all.
Right.
She thought they were, her words, they're deranged monks. I got to admit, I got to chuckle out of that. I got to chuckle. Why did I think of Ki-Adi-Mundi right away, too? What's up with that? You're like the Conehead of Star Wars. He's the first Jedi that pops into my mind when someone
he
says
sort of resembles deranged monk, I think. But yeah, so
we've
now
been
she does
talking about
say,
him. Maybe we've been talking about him because of his line. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
oh, yeah, he sort of set this whole thing up. He's one of the few lines. He has one of the few lines that sort of sets this whole era up. So
key.
Yeah.
He's the key.
So the mother is going
to.
Yeah, the key. She seems cool with this Osha's final decision. She says, I must discuss this situation with everyone here, but we will consider your wish when we do so. And, you know, it's not long after that they all end up dead. And
they do have that meeting, though, prior to that I was just talking about, where Coral reveals she wants to hunt them down, and that's when they have the debate where Coral says, I carry them, and then Anastasia.
Well, that's before that. That's before this.
Anastasia, oh, that's before that, where she goes, I
this.
created them.
Yeah, but that's
created
before
them.
this.
Yeah. Oh, okay, all right.
So the last we hear from Anastasia is that she's open to the idea of presenting Osha's wishes to the witches. And then they all dead, essentially. So that could play into what happens. How do we know that Anastasia doesn't confront the witches? The witches say, no, we refuse.
Right.
We would rather her die than become a Jedi. And to protect Osha, who knows? Maybe she wipes out all the witches, and in the process, she ends up being killed because she's intuitive. She's not in the same place. When they show the dead bodies of the witches, Anastasia is not there. She's in another spot. Now, this is all speculation, of course, but
I believe that there was an explosion, and that's what created the fire. And with the explosion, that's what killed everyone.
An explosion, but we see Mae start the fire.
We see her start the fire, but there's also that one moment in the middle of the episode where Mother Coral walks over to this giant, it looks like some sort of generator of some sort, you know, it might be the thing that powers their entire fortress. And she stands by it, and the shot lingers on that thing for a while. And I think that thing ignited and exploded, and that's what killed everyone. But there's so many questions about how that all went down. Now, Mae started a fire. Yes, we know she started a fire. But could the fire have spread like that so quickly and kill all of these witches? Or was it an act of self-sacrifice where they all took their own lives? Well,
that's sort of what it looks like. I mean, these people don't look like they died of smoke inhalation or died from being caught on fire.
Now, the mother looked like she was singed to a crisp. She looked really burnt up in the brief little look we had.
Yeah, it's very quick, and it was very dark.
Yes.
So I think the most interesting thing here for me, and this is one of the struggles that I have with the series. Now, earlier you were talking about the gaps, the holes that we don't see, which led you to believe, and others in the chat, I'm seeing them saying, "Oh, it was so obviously Osha's point of view because of the gaps that we see."
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm so used to gaps not being filled in on some of these Star Wars TV series that they don't jump out at me as being something that we have to know. I mean, there's so many times where I've said, well, we need to know why this happened or that happened, and we never find out. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I think I'm wrong here, but I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if we never learn what happened to the witches. Well, they just died. They just died, and that propelled these events to go on. I think that would be par for the course for some of the storytelling that we've seen in these shows. So that's why I didn't get the very obvious tip that it seems like you and others got about, what about these plot holes? Now, what does kill the witches? Here's the other question. The Jedi obviously have guilt and shame for the events that happened 16 years ago. Yes. There's nothing in this retelling that would indicate that the Jedi are to blame for anything.
Right. Because there's a big piece of the story that's been pushed under the carpet. And Soul says to Osha that it was Mae. I mean, he firmly lays the blame at her feet. And that's probably a certain point of view situation we're dealing with here. It's a certain point of view. What really killed those witches? Was it the fire? Was it the Jedi? Was it Kalnaka alone? Who knows?
Well, I think the biggest topic that came out of this episode, that rose from the ashes of this episode, is this idea of immaculate conception. That, I think, has the biggest ramifications in the storytelling here. We've only met one other character in Star Wars that I know of that was the product of immaculate conception, and that was Anakin Skywalker, a single child being born. Now we've got Osha and Mae, who seem to be demonstrating two very distinct halves of one whole. They even have a little nursery rhyme about it. We've got clues like Anastasia talking about unnatural. That's, as we said earlier, unnatural. That's what Palpatine says. So when he's telling the story to Anakin Skywalker about creating life, I think he's talking about whatever this process was that the witches used that would later be used by someone else. I think Anakin Skywalker's birth is a higher manifestation of the use of that ability, because they created one whole unit, one whole person who had two very distinct sides to him, as do we all. But in this case, we're talking about Anakin Skywalker, Vader. We see shades of the dark side in Anakin Skywalker, the look that he gives Mace Windu, which I think was a very direct or a very deliberate choice that George Lucas made in giving and having Jake Lloyd make that very angry face. It's probably the only time that we see that shade of Anakin in The Phantom Menace. The takedown of the Tuskens in episode 2. And then, of course, his defiant obsession / love for Padme. These are all signs of the other side of Anakin Skywalker, the duality, the dual nature. So I almost feel like that Osha and Mae are sort of a prototype for what happens and what brings us Anakin Skywalker, like a lesser version, because instead of one complete individual, it's two. And one is better than two in this case, because, one individual would be able to wield both sides. So that was my takeaway.
No, I think you're onto something here. And I think that will be illustrated later in the series as the Sith start to take a larger role in the way that these events are unfolding. And we might even find out it was the Sith who were responsible for the death of the witches. And the Jedi are being set up. I mean, wouldn't that be the most Sithy thing to do? To manipulate the situation and be very Machiavellian about all of it? To paint the Jedi as the true enemy?
Well, they might be very attracted if they got wind of these twins. They might be very attracted to this idea of taking the one that has dark side tendencies. And how do you do that? You divide them. it's divide and conquer. You cut them off from everything else that's providing any sense of balance or orientation in their life. And that's one.
Wipe out all the
isolate them.
matriarchs, all of their protection, the coven, it all gets wiped out, and that separates the twins. One has committed herself to the Jedi. What about the other one? If the Sith is truly pulling the strings on all of these events, they're ready for Mae. And that's how Mae survives. And that's how Mae develops Sith training over, she shows off that she's been trained by the Sith. She encounters a Sith. And that's very clear that there is a Sith behind the scenes manipulating the course of events. That's the case with almost every Star Wars story.
Yeah.
And
that's a really good reminder. That's a great reminder.
I think it might rear its head as this season starts to unfold, and we'll discover that everything is happening according to my plan. Whoever is the Sith in charge at this point.
Yeah.
The main thing is with the witches, though, and the manipulation of the dark side of the Force. They fear the Jedi discovering exactly how Anastasia created those twins. And you're very right.
Yes.
It's probably using the same recipe that Palpatine then puts into action as the prequel, prior to the prequel trilogy, obviously. So Palpatine, how does he gain this knowledge, though? The Sith take everything the witches had and use it for their own advantage. That's my prediction, that there is a Sith behind everything that happened. And it's not the Jedi and it's not the witches. It's the Sith who are manipulating everything that's happening that we've seen in this flashback.
Yeah, I like that. I hadn't, I got so I got so obsessed with the Jedi and the witches that I forgot about that third party that's hanging out there that has a lot to gain. So that's a really good reminder. Phone lines are open, by the way, 708-866-1737. We're going to be jumping on the calls here in just a moment. I had someone in the chat say, are the phone lines open? They are open, and we've got several waiting already.
It's kind of a dense episode for us to work our way through. And I know I'm working my way through it throughout this conversation.
For sure.
I'm having revelations as we hash this stuff out. So I don't want to take up all the time from our callers.
Right.
And I want our callers to call in and give us honest critiques that are based in the story that's being presented to us. And there's I'm really interested to hear what I told Tyler, I said, hey, good luck tonight screening calls, pal. But, we do want to hear all ends of the spectrum as far as what Star Wars fans think about this new addition to the saga. The thing is, though, is that I'm seeing people jump to a lot of weird conclusions online. Some of it I'm seeing being fueled by unsavory attitudes about certain things. To me, I'm all about breaking down the story that's being presented and is brought right in front of us, the Star Wars story that's currently being told without all the baggage of what you're carrying into it. So if you're going to call in and say, this episode sucked because Leslie Headland was Harvey Weinstein's assistant, I don't got time for that. I really don't. You know how many people in Hollywood pass through Harvey Weinstein's office and they're totally celebrated to this day? How many people listening to this show are big fans of Kevin Smith? He was in lockstep with Harvey Weinstein for years. So let's get over all of this. That's business. Okay?
Right.
Hollywood is a business. And to advance your career, being the personal assistant of Harvey Weinstein at the height of his power was like a genius move to advance your career. to advance your career.
Unless you were standing
that's
guard
the harsh
outside the
reality.
door while he was in his office doing all kinds of
Well, if she,
unsavory
she's,
things, that's a whole different story, right? All right. On
He's being
that
a
note,
good
let's go to
soldier,
the
right?
let's go to the phones. Let's
But
talk
there's
to
no proof. There's no proof to back that.
we've got Patreon. Whoa!
Turn it off.
Turn down turn down your computer. We've got Patreon member Rich. Rich calling in from Fond du Lac. Hey, Rich, what's happening?
What's up, guys? Yeah, Jason, you already kind of touched on it a little bit. But I was thinking tonight, the whole conception of the twins thing. I mean, that makes me think a lot about Darth Plagueis. And
why does it make you think of Plagueis?
Because of his fascination with creating life.
Yeah.
So I think this was kind of like, they were kind of like an Anakin 1.0.
Right.
Creating kind of a dyad and a dark and a light side in the Force.
It's been a while since I've read that book, that Plagueis book. Was that Plagueis's jam? Was this whole creation of life? Was that his thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I remember there being
creating life and feeding death.
I mean, weren't there scenes in that book where he was like sending his like Force aura out into the galaxy and kind of impregnating in a sense other beings and creating life? I think that was part of what he was doing.
I think so. It's been a while for me too, but I think so. But it makes. I mean, I'm like, heck, if this is where they're going with it, that's amazing, and that like enhances Star Wars stories. And if that's where they're going with it, I'm all for it. I'm all in for the show.
Yeah,
I think the breadcrumbs might lead to Plagueis, but whether or not Plagueis actually becomes a factor in this story, I think that's a long shot, quite honestly.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think at this point, like
either that or
featuring
maybe
Yoda is a long shot. I don't think we're going to get those kind of cameos. However, we have been told over and over again.
A cameo, though. I don't know that I would call him a cameo.
Does he even exist 100 years prior to the events of Phantom Menace? He dies, actually, during the course of the events of the Phantom Menace. So that would place him at least 100 years old. But, I mean, it's possible, you know.
Well, I would say, look, I guess the Tenebrous Plagueis, one of the two. I mean, obviously, it would more likely be Tenebrous, but I would like to see them establish with this Sith character or a Sith character in this series a direct line to Palpatine. I think they have to put that stake in the ground.
Yes.
Would be helpful. The dyad thing, Rich, I saw in the notes that was something you wanted to bring up, that the twins are a dyad. I don't know. I think they're definitely more, like you put it. I like the way you said it, the Anakin prototype. I'm more inclined to think that way than I am this. I don't even know what the hell the dyad thing is. I thought it was a pretty sloppy invention that they needed to explain their poor choices they made with Rey and Kylo Ren in that last movie. To be honest with you, I think it was
they had
nothing
no
more
idea
than
where
that.
the story was going for the first two films. They had no end in sight, and they had to create something somehow, some way, to connect all of these events of the first two films. So they came up with the dyad. Now, I don't dislike the idea of the dyad at all, but it is something that needs to be further fleshed out to
agreed. Yeah.
Large.
Yeah.
And I don't think twins is the way to do it. I think twins have their own dyad. Like I said earlier, in the show,
yes,
twins
exactly.
The twins in the real world, they've been known to create their own languages, and they have their own like universe they already live in sometimes. So, I mean, I don't think that is actually being reinforced in this particular show. I don't. The dyad. What do you think? I mean, Rich, do you have some sort of indication that the dyad is actually coming into play throughout the events of the Acolyte via the twins?
Well, I don't think it would have been like kind of like the same kind of dyad as the as in Rise of Skywalker. You know, it is more. I was thinking more like a twins dyad. You know, the special
I
connection
see.
between
Lowercase
them,
d.
and almost creating kind of a yin and yang.
Oh,
kind
very
of
much
thing,
so.
like
Yes.
dark and light.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't
We
agree
agree
more.
with
This is yin yang. This is good evil. This is I was joking with the guys on our Jedi Council saying this reminds me of the Trek episode when Kirk gets divided in half by the transporter.
Yes.
And you've got bad Kirk and you've got good Kirk. You know, bad Kirk gets the scratch on his face from Janice Rand. And,
Yeah.
Didn't they do the same thing? Didn't they do the same thing with Riker in The Next Generation? And they created a Thomas Riker because of a transporter malfunction.
I think they did.
Yeah.
Come on, Jason. I rely on you to be.
I know there are some. I'll admit right here there are some real gaps in my next gen knowledge. There's a couple of seasons where I'm a little.
I had no idea. After all these years, I could outflex you on TNG stuff. This is
might
great.
be able
This is a revelation.
No, the
I'm gonna
revelation
give
is
this
that
one.
I went to Jimmy. One of the first times I went to Jimmy Mac's house, because when we started working together, he would always give me hell every time I would bring up Star Trek. I go to Mac's house. I see all the next gen DVD box sets lined up on the shelf. I'm like, you son of a! All this time you're giving me hell, and there you are, Mr. Box Set.
Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. God, I ate up that Next Generation. It all happened when I was in college, and there was no Star Wars on the horizon back then. The Next Generation was my Star Wars back then. And I would consider myself a huge fan of TNG at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Spock sucker.
If only May had a goatee. If May had a goatee,
yeah,
then
right,
it'd be like,
right, exactly. That's
like
that's a good point because they are, the goatee like in the Mirror Universe. But there's nothing. You would think that they would have given one of the girls a little bit different hairstyle. They've got the same exact hairstyle. There's some questionable.
I caught on to that too. Like,
yeah.
That might
Rich,
come into
buddy.
play.
Good talking to you, Rich. Longtime friend of the show.
The fact that they're identical might come into play as the story unfolds, and there might be a switcheroo happening. Yeah, there could be something like that. There might be an actual purpose for why they have identical hairstyles and they look so much alike. I mean, these are decisions made by storytellers, hopefully, to go somewhere from point A to point B to point C. And there are certain things that get planted early in the story that would have you scratching your head. And we've seen this with Star Wars countless numbers of times, especially when I think about animated series like the Clone Wars, where things do actually pay off. If you stick with it long enough, it might actually pay off.
Yeah. Let's go to we got another Patreon on the line here. We've got Brian from Tennessee. Hey, Brian, you're on with Rebel Force Radio.
Tennessee.
Hey, guys, how are you?
Hey, doing all right. Just talking a little Acolyte here.
Well, and listen, y'all may have already touched on this. If you have, I'd rather my time go to Blake or somebody who has something maybe original. But my thoughts on The Witches was a little different. I've watched it 4 times now. I've watched it with the subtitles. I've watched it with the audio description, and because I really didn't like it the first time I watched it, so I rewatched it, and I've given The Witches a lot of thought. I don't think I was talking to Tyler. If you look at The Witches and think about the fates in mythology and the thread being linear, it not having a light and dark side. I don't think the witches really use or want to use the light or the dark side. I think they just have it on their spectrum, on that linear thread, and whatever makes their mutual gain, what makes them better, they will use.
Oh, I think you're
I did
absolutely
hear
right.
Jimmy-
When you
Go ahead.
hear May, or excuse me, when you hear Anastasia describe the thread, there is no mention of a good side or a light side of the thread. It's one thread, connects everything. So it's more like it. Yeah, I mean, the episode is called Destiny. I think you might be able to, substitute the word thread for destiny. What does that sound like? When you talk about one thing that connects everybody, you pull the thread, things change. That's really what destiny is. But you're right.
Yeah.
There's no sense of good, bad, right, wrong when it comes to this version of the Force that they practice.
Right. And I don't think they're fearful of the Jedi. I don't think they're fearful of the Sith. I think they want to be left alone. And maybe that's the thing. Here's just a theory. Is you see the witches are all adults. They're not getting new members into their coven, whatever you want to call it, or they call it. And so maybe they made a deal with the devil, which is a deal with the Sith. And I went back and I read the actual words from Chancellor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, to Anakin in the Opera House. And he does talk about that, and you touched on it just a few minutes ago, that he did find a way to create life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they made a deal with the devil because Anastasia saw the coven coming to an end, and they didn't want it to come to an end. So now, go ahead.
Oh no!
No,
did we lose Brian?
Keep going. No.
No, don't stop.
Okay.
No, Brian.
Don't
Brian,
stop. You're nailing it.
Max just
Dude,
reacting
Brian
to
from
all
Tennessee.
of this. Keep going.
Listen, Brian from Tennessee, you are on a path of discovery here, which I am totally down with. So please continue.
Well, and Jimmy, I'm actually doing Q&A in a couple weeks with you, so I'm incredibly excited.
Oh my God, I am
but
too.
Anyway, So, but I do think that if you go back to the Opera House, you look at Sidious's words, and I really think, especially when Anastasia talks to Coral and she says, "But let's not forget how they were made." I think something is going to come of it. With Jimmy, you were talking earlier about the tipping the balance of the Force, and I think you've got 100 years here to play with. And maybe this is the first time that the Sith, by the Phantom Menace, it is tipped to the dark side, and this might be the tipping point. So that's one of my thoughts about the Coven and about the.
Let me
creation
dive
of the
in
world.
here. That's great. I mean, that's awesome stuff. Let me dive in here though and just expand on what you said, because I got light bulbs. I don't know if it's coming up on the screen, but there are light bulbs popping up over my head as I'm listening to you talk, Brian from Tennessee. Now, here's the thing that I didn't consider. Yes, the Sith are the ultimate puppet masters. They are Machiavellian to the core. They're always manipulating the situation to work for them. They don't want to get their hands dirty, though, so they'll have someone else do their dirty work.
Right.
Anastasia does say during the Ascension ceremony that the witches were on the brink of extinction, but then they were blessed by a miracle. The twins.
Yep.
And Anastasia obviously did some manipulation of the Force to create the twins. What if they're in league with a Sith Lord, and the Sith Lord taught the witches how to create life from the dark side? Maybe this is something that's been floating around the Sith for centuries, and now they want to see if it's actually going to work. So they use the witches and impart their knowledge about manipulating the midichlorians. And so the witches do just that, further committing their actions to the realm of the dark side. And why Coral expresses fear for the Jedi learning how they were able to do it. The Sith are trying to lay low. They don't want to make their big appearance yet, but they're more than willing to manipulate the witches to make them try this manipulation of the midichlorians to create life for when they eventually want to do it, or they're going to take what the witches have created and use it for their own Sithy means. So yeah, I like that. I like how it's possible the Sith have really been manipulating this entire situation. And they knew the Jedi would show up too. They were counting on that.
Yeah. That was my next comment, Jimmy, was that, you know, they manipulated the clones in order. I mean, they manipulated the making of the clones because they knew what was going to happen down the road with the Clone War and executing Order 66, and they were going to need the clones. But I think you're right. I think that the Jedi, when the twins were made, if you notice, there's not a temple there. There's not a Jedi stationed on that planet. They're there for a reason. They're there on a mission, those 4 Jedi. And I think there was a disturbance in the Force. The disturbance in the Force could have been their creation. And they're there to go, okay, why were they created? How were they created? There was something weird about these twins showing up.
Yeah.
So what is it?
And
we got to get them away from
witches, if the witches are tapping into the dark side, and that's what attracts the Jedi, I think the Sith are betting on
that's the disturbance.
They're gonna create a disturbance in the Force so the Jedi show up and wipe out the witches, because even though the Sith are working in coordination with the witches, the Sith also want the witches gone because they're tapping into the dark side, and the Sith want to be like the Jedi.
Yeah.
The Sith want to be the arbiters of Force usage in the galaxy, and the Sith only work with 2. They only work with 2, so the witches don't fit into their strategy at all. So they use them. I think that's where we're heading.
How about this?
It could be where we're heading.
How about even going back? Yeah, I mean, and how about even going back further? You mentioned last week in episode 1 where they talk about, and it's an obscure line, but they talk about, Vanestra talks to Soul about the political, their enemies, their political enemies. If the Sith are already in the politics, they could be trying to wipe out the Jedi from within, because the Jedi wiped out the witches. If they find that out, then it's a big political mess. Then the Jedi are gone.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This is a great take. This is a really great take.
Really good. And I like I said, I was so distracted. I was so distracted trying to dissect the relationship between the witches and the Jedi that I completely forgot the other player on the board, which is the Sith. And we've been told since the beginning of this show that this was going to feature the Sith and how they started their rise to power and all of that. And here I was thinking that the Sith,
their point of view.
Right. And so the witches sort of being this sort of proxy for the Sith, manipulated by the Sith, just the same way that Palpatine ends up manipulating the Chancellor and the Senate. Yeah. Wow. Brian, thank you very much. Great call. Great thoughts. That's what this is all about, guys. Thank you, Brian. Proud to have you as a Patreon VIP.
Great call.
Let's get to some
I'm looking forward to having a RFR Q&A episode with Brian from Tennessee now. He's never hosted one before. And if this was his audition, he passed the audition. He passed. I can't wait to have the conversation with him. Fantastic. Thank you, Brian.
Salby Crom with a super chat says, is it me or does Kelnaka just look like a hairy Ki-Adi-Mundi? Yeah, it's the tall head. Yeah, just enjoy Star Wars and Spice Cream.
Maybe.
Thank you.
Kelnaka and Ki-Adi are the same person. It's just Ki-Adi is Kelnaka shaved.
Well, I have seen that what a Wookiee looks like shaved, and It's the
I
stuff of
can't keep a
nightmares, I'll
straight
tell
face.
you. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can't keep a straight face on that. Everybody knows I'm BSing right now. So I hope you know, because I throw out some things every once in a while where I know it's solid BS. And I'm talking tongue in cheek, but I think a lot of people believe some of the crap that we say on this show is coming from our heart. And like the twins, I am sometimes saying the exact opposite of what's actually in my heart. So, but no, Kelnaka and Kiadi Mundi are not the same person.
As if that needed explanation. Peter Beiser says, Acolyte, not my cup of tea so far, but still love live RFR. With the flashback, I'll have to give a ring next week to debate the Wookiee Jedi swank. About the flashback, yeah. My issue with the flashback about it not being obvious enough where the point of view was from. I get it. Zach
Did
says,
anybody notice in the flashbacks, Kelnaka, his head was shaved in a mohawk, and you actually see like Wookiee skull there? I mean, his head is shaved. That's how they indicate the passage of time. This happens earlier because this is when Kelnaka had a mohawk.
Come on.
Look closely, and you will see the mohawk.
I got a shot
You will
of this.
see the mohawk.
I got a Kelnaka
But
shot
he clearly has one. It's a shaved Wookiee head. And I'd like to know what barbershop Kelnaka goes to. And they're like, hey, Kelnaka, what do you want? It's like a slight fade going in the back or anything. You want the Polly Walnuts wings? We can do anything you want. He's like, no, just give me a mohawk. Well, how do you give a Wookiee a mohawk? Do we shave everything? No, just the top half of my head. Just shave that part, but keep the strip of hair down the middle. And people will think I'm like a road warrior Wookiee, So let's do that. All right, let's hear
Zach.
this.
Zach says, does anyone else get Jeffrey Epstein vibes with the kids and the witches, or is it just me? I think it's just you, Zach. I was not thinking about Jeffrey Epstein with the kids and the witches. But it was odd,
Zach,
that they were.
I'm just saying it's probably something Zach wants to discuss with his therapist. That's all. I mean, Super Chat might not be the place for us to analyze exactly what that means. But no, I wasn't either. Jason, you were saying.
I was just saying that they're using the Immaculate Conception of these twins, I think, in their minds, or at least in Anastaea's mind, as a way to repopulate the coven. She talks about how they were hunted, persecuted, forced into hiding until a miracle, the gift of life.
That's right. Yes,
and so
miracle or manipulation of the dark side. By manipulating the dark side to create life, is that truly Immaculate Conception? Or is it somebody messing with the works a little bit to do what they want?
I think that's just it's just my way of describing it. I don't know if there's anything immaculate about it. It's our own real world way of describing it. From a biblical standpoint, it's my only really frame of reference for a fatherless child.
But in Star Wars, we've been presented with the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise, and then in books like the Plagueis book and in the Darth Vader comic book from 2017, it's like the Sith want to take credit for manipulating the midichlorians to create Anakin. But I always felt like the Force is kind of pure and beyond that. Like you can't use the Force like that. And so when these cats try to do it, when Plagueis or Palpatine or whoever tries to do it, the Force will counteract what they're trying, what the Sith Lords are trying to achieve. The Force will work in a way that will create life, but it's not the type of life that the Sith Lords were trying to create. This is a creation purely of the Force. And so it's like a counter reaction to the Sith trying to manipulate the midichlorians. Life is created, but it is created purely by the Force as kind of like an FU to the Sith. Like, yeah, sure, you can create life. Yeah, we're down with that. Us, the Force itself, we're down with that. But the life will be created, but it's the life that's eventually going to destroy you. So could the same thing be in play here with the twins? Could this not necessarily be Anastasia creating life as she claims? It's the Force counteracting what she's doing, and as a result, the birth will grow into something that's going to snuff out the creator eventually.
No. No, I think
No,
in both
just
cases.
a solid no, just a hard no.
Yeah, no,
from
I think in
Swank.
both. I think
No
in both
consideration.
cases. Well, no, I'm giving you my explanation. I think in both cases, it's. I don't think that it's in the case of Anakin or in the twins. Is it the Force doing this on its own? I don't think the Force works that way.
No, but it's a counter reaction to attempted
I think it was deliberate.
manipulations of
I
the
think it was deliberate manipulation of midichlorians that created life. Because why would George have put that in there if that wasn't the explanation for the conception of Anakin Skywalker?
Yeah,
it
that's
wouldn't
true, but
need to be in there at all.
George also deliberately dropped stuff in there to provide debate and to provide certain points of view, I think. And he never defined what he actually did,
Well,
Lucas.
But George's take was that it all comes down to choice. You choose which side you're on. You choose to serve the dark side or you choose to serve the light side. By the Force, or in this case, by the Sith manipulating the midichlorians to create something, the assumption would be that something would be evil. It would be Sith-like. So I think that speaks more to what George was trying to say, is that regardless of your origin, you can have the most Sithy origin, even if you were manipulated and come into being by a Sith, you still have the ability and the power to choose.
Okay,
which is
I love
different
that.
than what we're seeing with these twins.
I love that, but George also constantly presents the notion of destiny to us. As a matter of fact, the title of this episode is Destiny, as if everything is predetermined. So the choices you make are choices that have already been made concerning your eventual destiny. So it gets confusing. I mean, is the Force absolute? Are you set on a path that you are predetermined to walk down for your entire life? Or do you actually have a choice? Can you determine your own destiny by the choices you make? And this is what makes me think about the thread. The thread. We get the thread gets puked at us throughout this whole episode, and it's all a certain point of view. That's how the witches choose to define the Force. The thread is not a power you wield. Pull the thread, change everything. It ties you to your destiny, there's that word again, and binds you to others. Osha is obviously on the other end of the spectrum from all this because she doesn't want to be binded to anyone. She wants to really go out there and choose her own destiny. And so the mothers say, well, that's her pulling the thread. But do you have to be someone who is considered a Force user to pull the thread? I think we as regular Joe human beings living on planet Earth in the year 2024 are always pulling the thread with every decision we make. And we don't need any Force abilities to do that. Now, granted, Osha choosing to go with the Jedi might not be a decision fueled by the Force, but I think it is. I think that's the light side inside Osha pushing her toward an entirely different lifestyle than anything she's been raised to believe in or accustomed to living in. And so It's the choice that matters, not the thread, not the force. It's the free will that matters the most.
Yeah, I don't buy the idea that just the term destiny implies no choice. Everyone has a destiny, and your destiny, I believe, is your choices that you make create your destiny. You create your own destiny.
Of course.
So I don't think George was ever trying to imply that we don't have choice. I do think that Palpatine and Vader both use the term destiny to make Luke feel as though his story is already written. It's a manipulation tactic, I think. It is your destiny.
You are this type of person.
Right.
So you should have this type of life.
Right.
Your future is already set in stone because of who you are.
Exactly.
Not even the Force. The Force has nothing to do with it. But that's the main lesson we're supposed to learn by pulling the thread. And you don't have to be a witch or a Jedi to pull the Force or the thread. You're just a regular person making decisions. Every decision we make changes our future in some way, either minor or minuscule.
Right.
It does. It does.
All right, let's get to some super chats here. Here's Egad says, may the force be with you, boyos. Thanks very much for that. Jeremy Lanning says, I haven't seen it yet. I just want to thank everybody for being here. This is a great group. I'll love it because I love everything Star Wars. Viva la Bunta. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Sign me up.
Adam says, not my favorite episode, cheesy at times, but I did appreciate the twin dynamics. I have twin boys, and they nailed the push and pull dynamic of young twins. That's cool. Thanks for that affirmation, Adam. Always attached but craving separation. Okay. Like that a lot. Thank you for the real world perspective. Let's see. Scott St. Louis says, Boston area Acolyte after show watch party, taking a break this week, turning in red milk for green to watch the NBA Finals. Great discussion. Jason, Jimmy, and Tyler, too. Go Celtics.
Well, I knew the Celtics was coming with the green. So, the Celtics are in the final right now. So, more power to them. I think they're up 2-0. Is that right? I don't know.
Pepper Spray Johnny, I see the error of my ways. Last week I mentioned some behind-the-scenes photos from last year that were being presented inaccurately. We saw that scene this week. Not sure what.
Oh. All right. Well, as long as he settled the error of his ways, I feel good about this.
Yeah.
Redemption.
Yes. N64 Rescue says, RFR is my favorite part about Star Wars. Jason is my Luke and Jimmy is my Han. Well, that's very nice. Thank you very much.
Who cares?
Joe Bitts says,
that would be Han Solo.
Joe Bitts says, chut, fellas, I appreciate your commitment to all Star Wars content and fandom. Acolyte is the first D+ show I haven't tuned into, so thanks for filling me in. Hey, that's what we're here for. Sometimes we watch it so you don't have to.
If you're a fan, you should go ahead and watch it. I mean, if you don't have a Disney Plus subscription, I'm sure there's other ways.
Yeah. No, he's saying it's the first Disney Plus show he hasn't watched.
I'm saying you should watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as Star Wars fans, we should consume all the content. I mean, I really do. I've always made that a goal of mine since the 90s, since I saw a very early layout of like the next 5 years of expanded universe. This happened around, 94, 95 when I first went online and started to tap into, access to like publishing schedules and things like that. And I saw the layout of all the Star Wars books that Del Rey had for the expanded universe for the next 5 years. I said to myself, I'm going to read every one of those MFers. And I'm going to try to maintain the most complete consumption of Star Wars material. And I carried on with that for the better part of maybe 2 decades. But nowadays, There are things I pass. I don't find that the publishing is anywhere near as effective as it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, some people are feeling that way about what they're seeing on Disney Plus. So,
well, that's true.
We don't want to discount. I don't want to discount that. And if people use
I know, but it's always been a goal of mine to at least know and have a working knowledge of every Star Wars story that's being told. Now, I know it's like rather impossible to even do that today if you consider all the different mediums. But when it comes down to live action, to me as a Star Wars fan, that's a no-brainer. Watch everything.
Drew Peterson says, are all Wookiees good mechanics? Kalnaka and Chewie are, so what about the rest of them? Wookiee Jedi are awesome.
No, Lumpy couldn't use a Phillips screwdriver to save his life. So chew on that.
Joe Bitt says, like and subscribe, everyone. This is a free show, and RFR has put in 20-plus years of Star Wars analysis, reviews, and camaraderie with so much passion. May the Force be with you all. Thanks, Joe. Good reminder to everybody. Yes. Yeah, please just give us a thumbs up.
You can be reminded of how many years we've been doing this by the lines in my forehead. It's like when you cut a tree. When you cut a tree and you count the rings, you can almost count the lines of Star Wars fandom on my forehead.
Tanya here says, let's all take a pause and thank Jason and J-Mac for talking us through this episode. Much needed therapy after last night. Okay, Tanya. Well, that's what we are here for.
It's always best to have these discussions, to really try to get the full picture and maybe understand things you didn't see when you watched it on your own. It's the certain point of view thing. Yeah, I know. I can drive that into the ground, but it doesn't hurt to get different points of view when new Star Wars episodes or content get launched at us. And that's why we do this.
Brian says, just a super chat. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Didn't even ask us to say anything. How nice is that? Oh, no, he's back.
Love you, Brian.
He's back with more. Brian, he says, smoke. I think he means Snoke. But Snoke says that the darkness rises and the light meets it. Could Anakin be the light that meets this darkness made by the Sith? Now, I don't listen to Snoke much, but
I think it's between the two twins. Light, darkness. You see it happening between the two of them.
Yeah. Mariana Barbara. Oh, Mariana. She says, powerful beings like Plagueis and Sidious couldn't properly clone Force sensitives, but random witches pulling out Force threads can. That is bad storytelling and contradictory to Lucas lore, in my honest and humble opinion. I don't know, because I thought Eric's comments earlier when he called, it was Eric, right? Eric from Tennessee. Is that the one?
Yes.
That
maybe.
If we're willing to concede that the Sith had something to do with the manipulation of the midichlorians that created Anakin Skywalker, and there's a possibility that the same Sith knowledge was given to the witches, or at least given to Anastasia, it makes sense. I agree with Mariana that if it's all face value, and she just came upon this ability out of thin air, then yeah, maybe it does take something away from what happens later with the Sith and Anakin Skywalker. But I'm willing to wait it out. Plus, you got to assume that this witch culture has been around for thousands of years, and who knows? Who knows? I think there's plenty of nits to pick with this episode. There's plenty of nits to pick with this series. I wouldn't pick that one. That wouldn't be the one. That wouldn't be my first choice, but appreciate the thought regardless. Fart Party says, you got me excited with shaved Wookiee head. Now I have to with that all night. Thanks for all you do. Love you, boys. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. All right. I think we got time for another call. Let's pick a good one here. We got Patreon. Let's talk to Chris from Vegas. Hey, Chris, you're on with Rebel Force Radio. Hello.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Doing all right.
Hey, listen, thanks for taking my call. I am jazzed to have another Star Wars series on Disney Plus. It is so cool. I have no idea where the haters are watching because I've been jazzed. This is the first series where my kid is into it and is watching it with me.
Cool.
Just turned 9. So maybe they're just waiting for the right age. I mean, he's
a good age.
He's watched the original trilogy, and you know he loves Return of the Jedi. Is his favorite film. Mine as well. Jason, you're in good company.
All right.
You know, and yeah. I don't. I'm a little. I have about the sort of the Rashomon, you know, who's doing what thing. But it occurred to me that I had a question, and I thought you guys are really good at analyzing, going, this is likely why, right? So I actually wanted to bring something up that I noticed in one of the earlier episodes. I hope that's okay. Is that all right?
Sure, of course.
I don't talk about this particular episode?
Yes, of course.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So in one, I forget which episode it is. All right, so hear me out. We see Saul doing the mind trick thing, like, you know, I think he does it 2 times effectively, but they show him doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they meet up with that like little squirrely squirrel guy who's, I don't know, Mae's master or go-between or whatever his case is. But anyway, when they first meet him and they're like, where is she? What's going on? He lets the dude talk. He doesn't just go, whoop, mind read and read it and get him to talk and tell the truth. And it struck me as really odd. I was like, well, why the hell would, at all times, at the most important moment where he could use this trick that he's got, where he could just essentially get the info right from him. Now, I'm assuming it's because of narrative, right? Like the creators don't want us to know something that he would find out if he pulled it out right away.
Partially.
But I've got to imagine maybe there's a story, an inner world reason that he would not use that. And I'm hoping maybe you guys might, like, it's just a thing that stuck in my craw.
So he uses it. He uses it.
Oh my God, it ruined it.
Yeah. He uses it.
Some dude's freaking out and he goes here and he makes him calm down and talk.
Right. Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I would say that is considered a I don't know what it's probably bad form to use that and abuse it. So if you have a witness who is voluntarily giving up information, it is likely, you know, if you're a police officer and the person isn't giving you any problem, you probably shouldn't tase them, right? I mean, you know, if they're cooperating. I think you had a person that was cooperating with Saul, and yes, could he have gotten more information had he used the Jedi mind trick, gotten into his head? Yes, but he didn't have probable cause to do so.
Right.
In this
question of ethics.
That's what I think it is.
Yeah. The Jedi just can't go around stealing people's thoughts.
Taking the blasting everybody.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that would be kind of dirty pool, wouldn't it?
I think it would be.
Okay, cool.
It would be.
Awesome, man.
It would be.
Awesome.
Now,
Thank
Obi-Wan
you,
used the Jedi
that's
mind trick.
Why I figured out that.
Obi-Wan used the Jedi mind trick in Tatooine to get past the Imperial stormtroopers, and had no issue with that.
Yeah, but
the stormtroopers, according to Obi-Wan Kenobi, they were clearly right, and they needed to be manipulated in a way to let Obi-Wan and Luke get past them with these illegal droids that they were carrying.
Well, and
to get to
Obi-Wan
the cantina to hire a pilot. I mean, their lives were on the line.
He kind of
I think the rules were a little. I think old Ben was playing loose with the rules by the time the original trilogy came along. There wasn't a Jedi council. Well, but there also wasn't a Jedi council, breathing down his neck.
Right.
He wasn't necessarily having to toe the line for his
And he was hanging
master
out
or
with
keep
Qui-Gon
up
a lot.
appearances. What's that, Chris?
Right. And if he was, and at the end of the series, we see that he's finally communicating with Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon was not. He was more so, do what you think is right.
Yeah.
So maybe his influence would have been hanging over.
Possibly,
on
yeah. Yeah.
Older,
But like Mac was saying earlier, sometimes what we say is just BS. So I'm just trying to BS my way through your question. But I do think, no, I don't have any other explanation for why he didn't utilize the Jedi mind trick on Chimera. Yeah.
I didn't have
say the BS. I don't remember saying
that makes complete sense.
BS.
What's that?
Yeah, you said sometimes the stuff we say is BS. It's true. When you were talking about Ki-Adi-Mundi being a shaved Chewbacca.
Oh.
Mac, you should listen to the show that we're doing.
All right, well, hey, let me reel that back in. Let me reel that back in and say, if I said that, I meant that like sometimes the things we say just to crack ourselves up. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
All right. Hey, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, buddy. Good call. Good call. All right. Let's do one more. Let's get in our buddy.
Time for Blake's Take.
All right, Blake. How you doing, buddy? Chut. We couldn't let a week go by without talking to you. What's this? Wait a minute. What's this I see about you having a 10:30 bedtime? It's summer. Tell your mom and dad to loosen up a little bit.
He's playing baseball. He's got all kind of things he has to
I don't think I'm gonna say that.
I'm just teasing. He's a wise man.
I mean, but they're listening
Blake.
to the show in the living room. So.
Oh, they're listening to the show. Okay, well, this is for you guys. Come on, at least let him stay up till 11. Come on, it's summer.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
Exactly.
We love the entire Blake family.
So what's on your mind, Blake?
Earlier you guys were talking with I think it's who's doing a Q&A with Jimmy. You guys were talking about
Brian,
Darth
I think his name is
Plagueis.
Mm-hmm.
And all that, and how he could be associated with helping have the twins. But I don't think it would be Plagueis, because he'd be too young. He'd be probably around his teen era around this time.
Yeah.
So it could be his master, Darth Tenebros. I think I'm saying
Tenebros.
Right.
Yeah. I'm open to the idea that it's. I don't know how moons isn't Plagueis a moon. I don't
Plagueis
know
is
how
a moon. Tenebros
is a Bith.
He's a Bith Lord.
A Bith Lord. Yeah. So I don't know how they age. I don't know how old they are. But yes, I'm open to the idea that it's either one of them. But you're probably right that it would be Tenebros at this time.
Yeah. See, I was thinking that maybe Tenebros. I'm just gonna call that Tenebros, and then the witches, just like how you guys were talking about earlier, they could work together, put one and one, and that's how they create the first new life. Which that goes into the talk about Palpatine and his master making Anakin and all that as a way of the Force taking back. It could be around that area of all the theories about that.
Yes. Does the Force hold a grudge? This is something I want to know. The Force is like, oh my God, they used the Force to create twins, and we didn't even know it. Well, I'll tell you I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna create the chosen one. That's what the Force is gonna do. We're gonna create the chosen one, and that will be a big kick in the beneath the belt for the witches who created the twins. I like the idea of the Force holding a grudge. I really do.
you bring up the
Force
idea. You bring up the idea of the chosen one. Maybe that's what they were going for. If the Sith worked with Anastasia, perhaps manipulated Anastasia into going through with this.
Yes.
Maybe that's what they were. As we were talking about earlier, this is an era where the balance seems to be tipped on the side of the light. So maybe the answer that the Sith comes up with, or they come up with, is, well, we need to create the chosen one so that we can balance out or overtake the light side. Possibly, I don't know. The chosen one thing is always that one to me has always been squishy. I think George has been inconsistent himself about two things: balance of the Force, what that is, and the chosen one.
No, I don't think George has ever been inconsistent about balance of the Force. He always made it very clear that the Force is balanced when the light side is predominant and the Jedi have full, complete usage of its power. It's all about the light side. And that's why I think the balance of the Force doesn't necessarily come into play with the Sith. Like, they don't consider that part of their religion or anything. But yet, I believe there is some truth to what the Jedi believe in. And I do believe in the balance of the Force. And I think that George has always been pretty clear about the Force slipping out of balance as evil rises in the galaxy and the Sith start tapping into what the Jedi have monopolized for decades, if not centuries, the balance of the Force. And when that happens, the Jedi can't use the Force. The Force becomes out of balance per their perspective.
Yeah.
If you ask a Sith, the Sith would say, oh no, the Force is getting much more balanced than it used to be. But I don't believe the Sith believe in that. I believe it's only part of the Jedi religion because it eliminates any sort of outside influence for the Force. It only considers the Force in balance when it's purely light manipulating and tapping into it.
What do you say, Blake?
I say that I agree with that. It's like,
yes,
I agree with everything you just said.
Uncle Jimmy is the best, is what you're really trying to say. Is that Uncle Jimmy?
Yeah.
Can I call myself Uncle Jimmy? I hope your family doesn't take any outrage to this, but Uncle Jimmy, I'm your Force uncle.
I'm all right with it.
Your uncle in the
He's
Force.
all right with it.
All right.
Hey, listen, if Soul can, here's something I want to throw at you. The grooming that goes on.
What?
When Soul confronts Osha, and he says, you would be a great Jedi. You would love being a Jedi. That's kind of grooming a little bit. I mean, he's really trying to influence her and like almost manipulate her
into becoming a Jedi.
Yeah, but maybe not. I mean, he feels the Force. And he feels the light side emanating from her.
Well, he feels that she's attracted to the lightsaber. She says to Mae, oh, look at their robes. Look at how their lightsabers hang from their belts. Mm-hmm. So he sees, that's the thing that she's noticing, attracted to. Oh, you like this candy? Maybe it is grooming.
Maybe it is. No, but you bring up a great observation there, Jason, is he was tipped off to the fact that she was impressed by their bling. And she loved that. She loved how they wore the robes, how they wore the sabers on their side. And one of our friends today brought up while we were talking, they said, hey, how does she even know what a lightsaber or a Jedi is? I don't believe, while these witches were cut off from existing in the galaxy, existing in regular society, I don't think they were cut off from information about what was going on in the galaxy. I saw things in the background that looked like computers that they could access, and all. They were online. They just had American online dial-up like we had in the 90s, but they were still online.
Uh-huh.
And they were seeing things, and they were informed. They knew what the Jedi were doing. They knew what what was happening in the galaxy around them. They just didn't exist in
Well, yeah, that's
it's kind of
probably
like
why she's so
like
obsessed with knowing more.
because the pull of the light side. If you're talking about Osha,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was just that
Because,
was the
she don't want
force.
to stay there. She wants to go explore.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Blake. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate the call.
Jason's getting tired.
Yeah, I'm starting to run out of steam. I'm
I
not
can tell.
gonna lie.
I can tell.
I am
We've
not
been doing
gonna
shows
lie.
together for a long time. I know what's happening here.
I
this is
just,
probably as good a time to wrap up as any. Because
Yeah.
my final thoughts will probably go on for another 20 minutes anyway. So we might as well
All
jump
right.
into
Well,
that.
I'll just head upstairs. That's the way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Gonna
Yeah, go put a turkey in the oven.
But you know, I think everyone's wondering how Tyler's doing, so we want to make sure that we get a chance to say hello.
I am
Tyler's
wondering
been very
what Tyler-
busy. We didn't get to all of the calls. We had a lot of calls in the queue. Thanks to Tyler. Tyler, you've been screening a lot of calls. I know that for sure. Anything that we didn't get to that you think is worth bringing up now?
Well, one thought that I had was, is there some kid out there who's watching the Young Jedi Adventure show, and they're gonna stumble on this show in 10 years and be like, how do they get nibs or nubs? Like, did they just steal nubs from his family? Like,
yeah.
Wait a minute. Was there a Young Jedi Adventures reference in this?
No, I don't think so.
No, but it is set in the same part of the timeline, the High Republic timeline.
Who the hell is Nips Nubs? What are you talking about?
He's one of the cartoon characters on this show that's clearly geared toward children much younger than our own. But I have watched some of the Young Jedi Adventures just to get a sense of what was going on. And I could only imagine how jarring it would be for a kid to be watching that show and then go, oh, more Star Wars, and turns on the Acolyte and sees the Sith witches and all of this crazy. It'd be like a kid, searching through the cable guide and seeing the HBO TV show Oz and thinking it's about the Wizard of Oz. And then suddenly they land on it and realize they're knee-deep in a prison drama.
I'm 46 years old. I've been into Star Wars since the day I was born. And I'm jarred when I turn on the Acolyte, okay? So I don't want to hear about what kids today think about this show. I'm struggling with this show, okay?
Let's be real about this. For crying out loud, it is a very different take.
It is. Well, Tyler, you're a fan favorite, so we absolutely needed to check in with you. Thanks very much for being here. And may the Force be with you. We'll catch you next time, bud.
Thanks, guys. See you.
All right, final thoughts.
Oh,
Acolyte, Season 1, Episode 3, Destiny. Jimmy Mac, go for it. I'm going to go get a drink.
No, you don't have to. Seriously. Well, he's gone. It's already too late. Swank is getting his drink on. Things I noticed throughout this episode that I didn't really get a chance to talk about during this conversation. A lot of attention is being focused on Brendok and how it's just all women and everything, and people are freaking out about that. Somehow the Wonder Woman franchise has been able to exist for decades, featuring an island called Paradise Island that's nothing but women. And I didn't see anything overtly beyond how those Amazons, those Amazonian women are being presented in Wonder Woman compared to how the all-woman witch coven of Brendok is being presented in the Acolyte. So, I mean, we've been consuming content like this forever. So I just don't think it's worth freaking out over just because it's all women. Not at all, as a matter of fact. And I enjoyed the struggle for the power dynamic happening between Coral and Anastasia. Coral thinks Anastasia is too lenient with the twins, and you get sense of a real friction happening between the two of them. Coral is militant. Anastasia, Mother Anastasia, is more nurturing and more open-minded. She eventually lets Osha join the Jedi through her own free will. And I think that's something that needs to be really acknowledged as far as the series goes. It also helps me break down those witches a little bit better, knowing that they're not fully steeped in the dark side, yet they are still practicing dark side ways. Osha realizes she's very different from the witches, and she wants independence. She's tired of always being connected to her twin. She wants to leave Brendok and see the galaxy, yearns for something more. Ring any bells, Star Wars fans? Luke Skywalker, A New Hope. Get off the desert planet, get away from the family farm, see the galaxy, live some adventures, get the big picture. Mae has, on the other side of the coin, Mae has everything she needs at the Coven and doesn't want to leave. The yin and the yang, firmly in play here. The witches were on the brink of extinction, but they were blessed by a miracle. The twins. Where do they suddenly get this ability to manipulate the midichlorians to create life? I think there is a Sith behind the scenes here, and they are manipulating everything the witches do. I hope that's the direction this show is going into. Those witches got kind of annoying to me after a while. I think I've spent enough time with them. They were laughing at inappropriate times during the ceremony with a stereotypical witch laugh. I was expecting to see a couple of them flying around on brooms with big warts on their nose, you know. So stereotypical. But yet I think that stereotypical witch idea is kind of coming into play here when you think about the witches being persecuted throughout the galaxy. Again, makes me think of the Salem witch trials. The twins were dressed like ancient Egyptians, kind of, when they had that thing that was draping around their necks and stuff. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. The witches' song sucked. The power of one, the power of two, the power of many. No, that thing ain't charting on any Billboard chart. So forget about. Oh, I thought it was interesting. We heard the full names of the twins: Mayho Anastasia and Verosha Anastasia. I always liked that. Like, I always thought it was kind of fun when we had who was that character from Star Wars Rebels? Zeb. His real name was like Zubarelios or something like that. I like when there's a little bit more behind these characters as far as like something as simple as a name goes. I like knowing their full names. They made a big deal about the Jedi slicing the platform to gain access to the fortress. I would have kind of liked to have seen that. I don't know what it means to slice the platform, but that's what the Jedi did. And I think that should have kind of, that we should have been presented with that visually, or been given a little bit more clue about what that actually means to slice the platform. But they just say it, and then the next thing you know, the Jedi are there. And the Jedi, was interesting to see them all in their younger versions. And Dara looked basically the same, but she's got this little eye tear tattoo. She only had one of them in the flashback. If you notice in episode 1 of the Acolyte, she has 2 of those little teardrops. I don't know what it means. Soul had short hair. Torben, no fake beard, full head of hair. He looked like a hobbit, quite honestly. And Kelnaka's head was shaved into a mohawk, as I mentioned earlier. And we did learn Torben was Indara's Padawan. That's interesting. Osha definitely wanted to be a Jedi, and the mother gave her the free will to follow through with that. And I think that does speak volumes of the character. Every time I really start thinking these characters, these witches are so steeped in the dark side. But the dark side really influences your selfishness and almost, it magnifies and amplifies that selfishness. But yet, Mother Anastasia was good with letting Osha go off on her own. Maybe it's because she had another one with Mae and thought, well, it's okay if Osha goes. I still got Mae here. She'll carry on the family traditions. I don't know what was going on in her head at that moment. I've spent enough time with these two kid twins. I really don't want to have any more storytelling focused on them anymore. I'm sick of them. I'll admit it. I'm sick of them. Sometimes the scenes that they were in were very effective. Like when Osha she came to on the Jedi ship after the events that went down leading to the extinction of the Sith witches, and she's the lone survivor, and she sits up and comes to in that Jedi ship. I thought that was a very effective scene. I thought that kid turned in some real acting chops in that moment. But in other parts in the episode, I was like, what? I couldn't handle the kids. I thought they were terrible. And so I don't want to spend any more time with them. I really don't. Nuke Gunray, not in this episode.
Oh, is that my
Jason
cue?
really did leave.
Is that my
I thought
cue?
you really
All
did
right.
leave.
Oh, no, I'm here. I listened to every bit. All right.
I'm gassed, man. I'm gassed. I got no more final thoughts. I'm done.
That was all you had? All right.
Next week I'll come up with some more.
Please do. All right. That's it for us. We'll see you guys next time. And don't forget, new Rebel Force Radio, the weekly podcast, coming out this week. So double your RFR fun. We'll see you. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Man.
And remember,
The Force will be with you, always.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.